Hello and welcome to lesson 13 of JavaScript. In this lesson, we are going to look at classes and objects. Now in JavaScript, we have object-oriented programming way of doing things, but the object-oriented programming in JavaScript is not as defined as other languages, but the concept remains the same. My name is Mildred. So far, we have looked at different methods in JavaScript. We have looked at how to use dates and date methods, strings and string methods. We've also looked at the concept of loops and how we can use the different loops. Now we are going to look at how to apply all these concepts in creating classes and in creating objects of classes. A class is like a template for creating objects in JavaScript. And we write a class by using the class keyword like this in all lowercase, and then we give a name to the class. Let's say we want to have a class called events. Then we have a pair of curly brace. It is within this curly brace that we begin to define our properties and our methods for this event class. The first thing you should have is a constructor method written with constructor like this. This constructor is called automatically when we create an object of a class. The constructor can take arguments or it can remain empty, and then we'll put a pair of curly brace like this. Let's say we have a constructor with an argument called the year, and we want to say this dot year is equal to year. So the year is always going to be the year the user enters when an object of this class is created. Now we can start creating other methods within this class events. We create a method just like we create functions outside of a class, but we do it this way. Let's say we want to have a method called age. We want the user to enter something like the year of birth, and so we represent that by using X. What we want this method to do is to return this dot year. So we want it to return the year minus X. So what we are saying that this method should do when it is called is that the year of birth supplied by this should be subtracted from the current year to get the age. So this will always produce the age of the person when it is on the page. We can create a different one without using the year. Let's say we want to create something like calculate deadline function like this, or we call it methods here. And let's say the calculate deadline is going to take an argument y. Now take note that you might not understand this immediately. You need to go over it over and over again. The first time is going to be difficult. The next time you find yourself memorizing the structure. Then when you begin to practice, you find yourself understanding the structure. So don't worry if you don't understand for now. Just keep going over it, and at some point it will begin to make sense. So let's calculate deadline. We used dates in the last lesson, and let's say that we want to say let z be equal to, we want z to be a date, and so we want it to get today's date like this. If it gets the current date, we want it to return the date plus the deadline. So let's say that an assignment is given. The assignment has a 10 days duration. The deadline for the assignment is in 10 days time. So we want the browser of the user to always tell them when it is the deadline based on their location, not based on a different time zone. And so we are going to return z.setDate. Remember we did this in the last lesson. If you can't remember, go back to date and date method lesson, and then you're going to understand how we are getting the day of the date string, and we are adding the day that the user has specified to it to give us what date it will be in the future. So we'll say z.getDate like this, and then we want to add y to it like this. So we have two methods within the class event. One method calculates the age, the other calculates the deadline. This uses the property year. This doesn't use the property for the constructor method. If you do not add the constructor method, JavaScript is going to add an empty constructor by default. It's always good practice to add your constructor here if you have one. So we have the age and the calculate deadline. Let's say we want to print to the page to see what it produces. Now on my page, I have 4 p tags with different IDs, and I'm going to try to use those IDs to output text to the page like that. So we want to first of all print out the age of a user given the year of birth. The first thing you do when you have a class is you want to create an object of the class. Let's create a variable and call this variable let result, and the result is going to be equal to, you create an object of a class using the new keyword, and so we'll say new event like this. So let's say we are working with 2022 like this. So we have let result is equal to new event 2022. So now it's going to be using 2022 as the year. Let's say we want to print out the age of somebody. So let's say result. So now we are going to be using result because it is now an object of the class. So we say result dot, what we want to get is the age. So we are going to call the age method, and in a pair of parentheses supply the year of birth. So let's say somebody who was born in 1987 should be 35 years old in 2022. So let's say 1987, and we want to print out the age to the page. I'm going to save, go to my page, refresh, and we have 35 to the page. So a person who was born in 1987 is 35 years old. If we change this and say we are not using 2022, we want to get result as at 2020. Now this is going to help you in data analysis where you want to set the date for what you want to do. So we have 2020. So if this were 2020, a person who was born in 1987 should be 33 years old. And so because we have changed the year, I'm going to refresh the page and I'm going to get 33. So now you get the whole concept of class, creating objects of a class. This is the best way to write your programs, because if things change, you can come and change a method or the method definition of a class, and then it applies throughout the application. So you don't have to always go into different lines of code to change stuff. And then also it makes your code reusable, because outside of the same application or outside of the application, you can use classes across applications, knowing that this does this, so I can always reuse class. So it brings the concept of reusability. Another thing that helps you to reuse classes is inheritance, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. So let's look at the calculate deadline method and see how we can use it in this construct. Now, for the calculate deadline, we have already created an object of the class, so we don't need to recreate the object. We can just call result like this, and we are going to get results.cal deadline, and all we want to supply in the parentheses is the day. So let's say 10. So today is the 27th day of December 2022. If we add 10 days to 27th, we should be getting like 6th of January. So I'm going to save this. This is going to give me the millisecond representation of this. But if you want it to give you the value of the dates and not millisecond, you use the new dates method like this, and then you put this in a pair of parentheses, save, refresh, and to give you the date string. So it's going to be 6th of January 2023 in my browser's time zone. So in your own time zone, it might be different. It might be the same 6th of January, but the time is going to be different, or it might be a different time or a different day, because time zones can change up to 24 hours. So some countries are up to 24 hours ahead of other countries. So you will see the different changes in time zone when you do your practice. So let's look at the concept of inheritance. We have this events class. Let's say we have a different class here called helper. So we'll say class helper like this. Now, what we want this helper to do, we want it to be able to access this age method, this calculate deadline method, but we don't want to create those methods within the class helper. You know this concept in real life where someone inherits properties from their relatives or their parents or something, and they get to have access to everything the person owns when those things are passed down to them. It is the same concept with inheritance. When a class inherits another class, it inherits all the properties and the methods of that class. And so we use the extend keyword like this to indicate inheritance, and we are extending the events class like this. And so by specifying extend events, we have already told the helper class, or giving the helper class access to all of these methods and properties of the event class. And so we can use them within the helper class without having to call the event class or create an object of the event class. So this also encourages reusability of codes. Inheritance is a concept of object-oriented programming where a class inherits methods and properties of other classes, and it enables code reusability. Now we have done this, and I want to show you or prove to you that this actually inherits the methods and the properties. But one thing we have to do is we want to create our constructor, and the constructor here is year. So we still want to have the same constructor called year. Now we're having the constructor called year. We are not redefining year, but we are going to use the super method like this, which means it's going to inherit this from the parent class. So super means it takes the same definition from the parent class, like this. So anytime you see super, it means that this inherits from a class and this is from the parent class. So we have defined the constructor. If we come down here and we create an object of the class helper instead of the class event, let's say result helper, like this, and we're going to call this new helper, and we'll specify a time, let's say 2023. We're going into the future. If I say document.getElement by ID result helper.age, so the person born in 1987 is going to be 36 years old in 2023. A person, a deadline is going to remain the same, but we want to just show that this still has access to perform this operation on a method that is not of this class but is inherited. So when I save this, I'm going to refresh my page, and we'll have the age to be 36 because we are using the year 2023, and we'll have the deadline to remain the same of January 6. So I'm going to refresh and we'll have it that way. The only thing you can't do is to edit or change properties or methods from this class, but from the parent class you can. So from an extended class, you can't change those things. We also have this concept of getters and setters, and you're going to use that a lot in other languages and also in this language. So this is always the best pattern of software development, using object-oriented method of doing things. And you want to create getters and setters to actually make these things easier. So how do we create getters? Let's say, for instance, we want to have something called getYear, like this. What does year do when we say getYear? It just returns the year. So it will return this dot year, like this. So every time we want to know what the year is set to, we just get the year like this. How do we print this out to the page? So let's look at this. We'll say result helper, let's leave it as this, is equal to new helper, and let's change the year to 2000, like this. Documents or get element by ID, we want to put getYear. So but when you are calling a getter method, you don't need to put the parentheses, so we'll just put year like this. When I save this and I refresh my page, it should print the year in the first line has 2000. So when I save and I refresh, I have 2000 printed there. So this is how we create a getter. How do we create a setter? We use the set keyword, and let's say set year. So whenever we call this, we use this to change the year. And what does this do? We'll say this. So when we are setting year, we give it a parameter x, and we'll say this dot year is equal to x, like this. And so every time we want to set here, for instance, we can do something like, we're going to call this result helper dot year, and we're going to say this is equal to, let's change the year to 2025, like this. And then now when I save and refresh and I'm trying to get the year, I should be getting 2025 and no longer 2000. And the thing is this, whenever you use this is equal to, you are setting. Whenever you use it without any equal and no parentheses, you are getting. So we have set the year to 2025. Now we want to get the year, and when I refresh my page, I should get the year as 2025. So these are the basic concepts of object-oriented programming. We are going to understand this better when we begin to apply this to our software development project. So I'm going to delete all of this. Now, there is something about objects. We saw how to add items to an array, how to remove items to an array. We saw the different methods in arrays. Now let's look at how we can add properties and remove properties from an object. Now let's go back to our person object that we created previously. Recall that we create an object like this, and we put it in name value pair. And so we're going to write the name of the property and then the value for it. So let's say we have the property called first name, and the first name is, let's say, Jane. So we can actually do this on multi-line like this so that we can have it neater. So we have, this is going to be a comma separated list within the object like this. So we have last name, and the last name is Doe. So this is going to be in quotes. We have, let's say, the age of Jane Doe is 30. Let's say Jane Doe race is, go put Latinx, like this. We have also learned that to loop through or to print out all of the properties and the values of an object, we do it like this. We use the for in loop like this. So let's say for I, let's say for let I in person, and what we want to do is we'll have something called let text equal to this. We will say text plus equal. We want to print out I plus we want to print a colon, plus we want to print person I. So we are printing the property, the value, and then break. So everything will be on a new line like this. So refer back to the last lesson or to last week's lesson if you have forgotten how to use loops. So what I'm basically doing here is using the for in loop, saying that for I in person, let this loop through. I is the key in the object. Print out the key and append the column, then print out the value of the key, each one on a new line until you get to the end of this. Then I want to print out text to the page like this. When I save this and I refresh, if all is well, I should get all of this printed to the page. So I have it Jane Doe, age 30, race Latin X. So this is how you can look through and print out the property and the values of objects to a page. Now let's say I want to add a new property here to this. To add properties to objects, you just call the object name like this, person dot. Now I'm going to put the new name. Let's say I want to write the nationality of the person, and I'm going to say nationality is equal to, let's say, Belize, like this. And now when I save this and I refresh my page, I should have a new nationality added to this Belize. Let's say I don't want to add a nationality, or I'll just put it here, nationality, and I'll change this to Belize like this. Let's say I want to remove the age. I don't want the age to be there. I will use the delete keyword like this. And what am I deleting? I'm deleting person.age. And so when I refresh this time, I am not going to see this age here because I have deleted it out of the object. So this is how we add and delete properties from objects. We have seen how to use the getter and setter method in the concept of class. Let's say we want to create a getter method here. Let's say this is going to be something called group, for instance. We don't have a nationality here. We want to create a getter method here. So let's say get race like this. And then what we will do here is that we want it to return this dot group. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to get a getter method here where if I call on this method race, it just returns the group of the person. So this is one way of also reusing your code and making your code more compact and nice. So I'm going to remove this delete here. I am going to say print out. Let's not look through. Let's just print out person.race and let's see. Now because I have a getter method called race, I'm just going to get the race, and race is going to print out group for me. So I'll save this, I'll refresh, and I'm going to have the race Latinx. So every time I use the getter method like this, we can also have many getter methods. Let's say get name like this, and then let's say get full name. And what I want to do is to return this dot first name plus this dot last name like this. And here when I say person dot get, so I'm going to do person dot full name, it should return the first name and the last name. So when you are using all these getter methods, even if it's a method, you are not going to use the parentheses there. So when I refresh, I'm getting the full name like this. So you can have a lot of getter methods. You can also have the setter methods like we've just seen previously. So these are the different things we can do with object. Object is very rich. So for those who move on to doing JavaScript as a full course with JSON and jQuery and move on to REST APIs, you are going to see exactly why we use objects in JavaScript. And when your system is designed with JavaScript, it's very easy to build your APIs or interoperability where you can exchange data between two systems, because JavaScript to JSON passing is easier than passing from other languages. And so this is why this is very important that you understand this concept, because in your journey of software development, at some point you really need to understand the concept of REST APIs, and this will come in handy. So we also have something like constructor functions, and how we create this is thus. So let me delete this and let us create constructor functions using object. Let's say I want to make this a function instead, and I say function person. I want to put all the properties here. I want to have the first name here. I want to have the last name here. I want to have the age here. I want to have the race here. And I want to have the nationality here, like this. I've created a constructor function. I will say this dot first name, let me spell this right, is equal to first name. This dot last name is equal to last name. This dot age is equal to age. This dot race is equal to race. This dot nationality is equal to nationality. So I've created this. The next thing to do is to create an object of this class. So let's say person1 now. So where this is handy is you create this constructor function where you pass arguments to the function when it is called, and then you can create several objects of the same class. So let's say person1 is equal to new person like this, and the new person is going to be, the first name is, let's say the first name of this new person is Jane, the last name of this new person is Doe, the age of this person is 30, the race of this person is Latinx, the nationality of this person is, let's say, Dominican. We can create another object of another person and we'll call this person 2, and person 2 is, let's say, John Doe. John Doe is 43. John Doe is, let's say, Asian. John Doe is from, let's say, person 3. Person 3 is, I'll use my name, last name, age, race, let's say black, and nationality, let's say Nigerian. Now we're going to be printing out this to the page, but instead of printing out this to the page, I want to just make a statement. Let's try to use this in a statement, for instance. So I'm going to say, so this is equal to, I want to use the first name. So I'm going to say person1 dot first name like this, plus, so I want to say Jane dot first name, put a space and continue my statement. Is, I want to put the age, I'll put a space, a plus, and I'll put person1 dot age. So I want to say Jane is 30 years old, so I'll put plus like this. So I can do the same thing for person 2. So I'll replace all person1 to person 2, and I'll replace all person1 person 3 here. So let's see if this works. So I want to have Jane is 30 years old, John is 43 years old, and Mildred is 36 years old. So I'll save this, refresh my page, and if all is well, I have that printed to the page. So this is how we use object constructor function in JavaScript. So when you have these constructor functions, you can add or delete properties from this like this. There is object prototype that we can use to do this. So we've created these persons. Let's try to use object prototype so you can understand how that works. We have person 1, person 2, person 3. Let's create text 1 like this. So text 1 is equal to an empty string. Let text 2 be equal to an empty string. Let text 3 be equal to an empty string. We want to loop through, let's say for let I in, and we're doing this for person 1. We want to print out all of the properties and the value of person 1. So say text 1 plus equal I plus, I want to put a colon, so to put first name Jane, last name, so I want to print it out like that, plus person I, so I want to print person 1I like this, and we want to print out each one on a new line like this. So I'm going to do this for each person 1, person 2, person 3. So I'm going to change this to text 2, change this to person 2, change this to person 2. I'll put this as text 3, change this to person 3, change this to person 3. So I want to loop through this, and I want to show you how we use the prototype. So I'm going to delete these printouts. What I want to print out here is text 1, text 2, and text 3, like this. Save this. When I refresh my page, I should have all of the properties and the values of each of these person printed to the page. So this is how we loop through and print everything out to the page. Now, I want to add a new property to this. And if we use a normal method, it will result in an error. So when we have an object constructor function, there is just one way that we can add something. Let's say we want to add something like language. I'll come here and say the person method dot, I must use prototype like this. And then I'll now put what I want to add. So I want to add language. Let's say the common language that they all speak. Let's say they all speak English. So when you want to add a new property to an object constructor function like this, you must use the object name or the function name dot prototype dot the new property and then equal to the value. Now I have this new one there as English, and so I can come here to now put a new language, or I can leave it because this automatically adds the language value to all of them. So when I save this and I refresh my page, everybody has a language, English, added to them. So this is basically all we are going to look at in classes and objects. We are going to use object-oriented programming method to create our functions and method for our software development projects. But I will encourage you to read more and practice. Give yourself some work to do. I'm going to put a lot of walkthroughs and different kind of examples for you to be able to understand this concept. Remember that you are not going to understand this the first time. You are not going to be able to make sense of it the first time. Only when you practice. When you start practicing, it begins to make sense. So you find yourself, first of all, memorizing, then practicing, and then understanding. So don't get discouraged. Keep practicing. So this is where we end this lesson. In the next lesson, we are going to look at conditional statements in JavaScript. Thank you, and see you in the next lesson.